Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Developmental Psychology. In this video, we're going to take a look at Chapter 6, Part 2. We're looking at early childhood cognitive development. I'm going to go ahead and get our screen share going on. Yay. Now get our PowerPoint going. Okay. Psi 9, early childhood. This is Chapter 6, Part 2, cognitive development. We're going to take a look at theories of cognitive development, early childhood education, and language development. The first theory we're going to talk about is Piaget's cognitive theory of development. We have talked about it briefly before. This is a diagram here of the different stages of the theory. We start off with our sensory motor period from birth to 2 years old. Next, we have our pre-operational, which is 2 to 7 years old. This is the period that we're looking at here in early childhood. We have concrete operational from 7 to 11 years old, and then formal operations, which is adolescence to adulthood. So this is just a little overview of Piaget's theory of cognitive development. According to Piaget, early childhood is when thinking becomes representational. In other words, the child begins to internalize images and use symbols. For example, the use of language. Language is somewhat symbolic because we have certain words that represent concepts, ideas, or specific things. There are these areas of cognitive mistakes that children make during the pre-operational period. We are going to take a look at the following. We're going to look at conservation and something called a conservation task. We're going to talk about the concept of reversibility and centration. We are going to look at classification and egocentrism, and specifically animism. These are areas that children in early childhood tend to make errors in. The first thing we're going to talk about is egocentrism. Egocentrism is a failure to distinguish other views from the views of your own views. For example, this is something called the 3-mountain problem. In this type of task, and there's a lot of modified versions of this task, the child will be asked, what do you see? What can you see from where you're sitting? And they will describe to you what they're seeing. Then they would ask the child, what does the doll see? And the child will make the error of saying that the doll is seeing everything that she can see. We're going to watch a video that demonstrates this task quite well. So the egocentrism that is experienced in this case by our pre-operational child, according to Piaget's theory, is that she cannot take someone else's perspective. Animism is attributing human thoughts and feelings to inanimate objects. According to children in early childhood, their stuffed animal or stuffed dinosaur or whatever it is has feelings and thoughts the same as they do. They often believe that these inanimate objects are living, feeling creatures just like they are. Another error that we see in this age group is an error regarding classification. An example of this would be, I can ask the child, do you want the Skittles or do you want the candy? And a older child would probably say, oh, I want the candy, because that's going to include the Skittles as well. However, our pre-operational child would just say, I want the Skittles, because they would have difficulty with classifying these things. The conservation task is a task where you would have two glasses, as we see in this first illustration. We have two glasses with the same amount of liquid in them. The liquid from one glass is poured into a tall cylinder. In this first illustration, we would ask the child, hey, do these cups have the same amount? Are they the same or are they different? And the child would say in this first illustration, oh, they're the same. They have the same amount. Then we take the cup, we pour it into a tall cylinder, and then they would be sitting next to each other, and you ask the child, which one has more? Or does one have more, or are they the same? And the child would say, oh, this one has more. It has more because you can see that it's taller. And when you ask the child, they'll say, when you ask them why it has more, they will tell you that it's because it is taller. They make this error where if you take this and you pour this back in to a glass that is the same as this glass here, and you pour it back in and you ask them if the amount is the same, they would say, yes, it's the same amount again. You pour it back into the tall one, and the child will once again say, no, this one has more. They are experiencing an error with centration, meaning that they can only focus on one of these traits at a time, meaning that they're not able to grasp the idea that although this cylinder is narrower, it is much taller. So that is why it can hold that same amount. They're also making the error of reversibility. That idea that to be able to mentally undo what was done. So the liquid was taken from the small glass, poured into the tall cylinder, and then the child says, oh, there's more. But they're not able to mentally reverse this task and in their mind pour this back into that cup to see that it actually remains the same and that the task, that there is the same amount. If you reverse that action, it is the same amount of liquid in both containers. So that's the conservation task. And why do pre-operational kids fail the conservation task? Centration, focusing attention on one characteristics to the exclusion of all others. So that is focusing on the fact that the glass was taller, so it was holding more, not understanding that because it was taller, even though it was narrow, it was holding more. And reversibility, the inability to mentally reverse the actions. We are now going to do another screen share. I'm going to open this video. I'm going to take us out of this. Okay, end the show. All right, we're going to open this and I want to show you guys a video. All right, let's see. Open link. All right, we're going to do a new screen share so that you can see the screen with this. I also had a little note about sharing the computer audio, because if I don't share the computer sound, you guys won't hear it. And I've already made that mistake before. I don't really want to make that one again. All right, so this is a short video and it's going to take us through the stages of Piaget's. It's going to show you some examples with children going through Piaget's cognitive stages. All right, here we go.
New babies aren't quite sure what happens to objects when they leave their sight. Sky's mom keeps disappearing and reappearing. No wonder peekaboo is so much fun. During their first year, however, infants will learn an important concept: object permanence. Everything has a life of its own, even if it is out of sight.
At Maya's age, babies know to look for the object, but they might not have everything else straight. 10-month-old Simon is about to make a classic mistake. Although he watched us place the toy plane under the white cloth, he'll look for it where he last found it, not where he watched us hide it.
That's that A, not B error.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice?
This is the conservation test.
You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready? Yeah. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both the same.
They're the same?
5, 5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away?
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks like bigger.
All right, we're going to play a game with the graham crackers, and we're going to share them between me and you, okay? Okay. Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You share. You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down right there?
Okay.
Now is it fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have two.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl?
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
So that was our early childhood stages.
So first we're going to look at these two cups right here. Do you think there's the same amount of juice in this glass as there is in that glass?
This is the operational stage, which is our
There
next
even- okay.
area that we'll
so
be
we're
looking
gonna
at
take
in our
the
next
juice
chapter.
from this glass and pour it into this one right here.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to look at this glass and that one. So do you think that there's more juice in this glass, more juice in this glass, or do you think that they have the same amount?
Same amount.
Okay, why do you think that they have the same amount?
Just because this is skinny doesn't mean it's not the same amount. It has the same amount of juice in it, but this one is just wider and this one's skinnier, but they have the same amount of juice in it.
It says, if you hit a glass with a hammer, the glass will break.
I knew that.
And then this one says, Dawn hit a glass with a hammer.
I knew that too.
So what happened to the glass?
It broke
It broke. Why did it break?
because the hammer's hard.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
No, it won't.
And this is the second rule. Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
Nothing.
Nothing happened? Why didn't anything happen?
Because the feather was soft.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
Okay.
And the second one, Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
It broke.
And why did it break?
Because the rule says if you hit a glass with a feather, it'll break. So if you hit a glass with a feather, it broke.
Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so this brings us back to where we're at now. All right, so that was an interesting video. I hope you enjoyed that. It was demonstrating the stages of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory. At this stage of development in early childhood, children also develop a theory of mind. That is an awareness of one's own mental processes and the mental processes of others. It is that ability to really grasp that the way you are thinking and perceiving things may be very different than someone else. Others can have thoughts that are very different from your own. And this is seen in joint attention and pretend play. There's also something called a false belief task. We're not really going to get into that in this video. All right. Cultural learning is something that we all experience as we grow and develop within our own environment. Children have a capacity for learning culturally specific skills in early childhood. This is often done through guided participation. In some cultures, you may have a child who's learned in early childhood is now going out and starting to learn to fish, or starting to make tortillas, or starting to help with some tending the animals, other types of cooking. And this is being taught within the culture. So they are learning culturally specific skills within childhood. In developed countries, this will happen through things like going to school. They may help to prepare a grocery list since they're able to write now. They're going to help organizing things, helping counting the money, hold conversations with people. In developed countries, it may be very different from some of the developing countries. In some cultures, children are given important responsibilities in home life, and I already mentioned that. Things like tending animals, helping with cooking, tending to younger children. And even in developed countries, sometimes children at this age can be helping to watch younger siblings and help with certain items around the house. A lot of the cultural learning in developed countries is going on within the schools as well. Two factors are very important that demonstrate differences in cultural learning between developed and developing countries. And the first factor would be time apart from families. In developed countries, we see children in early childhood spending a great deal of time away from their family. They are in a school setting or at daycare, oftentimes away from their primary caregivers. Whereas in a developing country, oftentimes a child in early childhood will be assisting with the caring of younger children or doing some of those other things that we talked about. And often they are in close proximity to their primary caregiver. The complexity of adult activity in the economy. So what that statement means is, for example, I work at a police station and do mental health crises. I'm not going to take my small child with me to work when I do that job. I would need to leave that child with a family member or at daycare, or they'd be going to school for part of the day while I'm doing this job. That's very different than a lot of the developing countries, whereas maybe the mom is doing some a little bit of farming chores or animals or collecting things from their environment. whatever work that mom is doing, oftentimes the child is coming with them and assisting them with that job. So that is very different than what we see in a developed country. Education. Okay, early childhood education is very important. Traditionally, formal schooling begins at about age of 7. In developed countries, most kids are enrolled in some type of early education program. The US, however, lags in its rates of early education. We're talking about like preschool. Almost all kids in Japan, Sweden, and the United Kingdom are enrolled in preschool. In the United States, we do not have as high of a number of kids enrolling in preschool. And part of that is due to accessibility. I know that I tried to get my youngest son, my older kids went to preschool. My youngest, I tried to get him in a preschool. This was, of course, several years ago. And I kind of was in the middle on the income stuff, so he couldn't qualify for an income-based preschool program. And then I tried to get him into another preschool, but it was very expensive and he was on a waiting list and he never did get in. So it's not always accessible to people. And that is one of the problems that we see in the United States. There are variations within a culture with preschool. There is something called the Montessori schools, which are effective in cognitive and social development. The Montessori schools are kind of a hands-on, less structured, child-centered type of environment. Some countries, and we have a lot of those in the United States, some countries focus on basic academic skills. For example, China and the United States, we're focusing on those kids being able to write their name, learn their ABCs, things like that. In Japan, the focus is more on getting along with people, playing in a cooperative fashion, learning social skills, and being a member of the group. And that could be due to Japan is very focused on being a collectivist. I mean, they are a collectivist culture, so their focus is going to be on creating good members within their society. And within the United States, we are focused more on the academic part of it. A lot of children here in the United States have to attend preschool. And of course, we did mention that a lot of developed countries also have high enrollments of their children in preschools. And that, right before they jump hard and heavy into actual schooling. And there are some factors that are important in preschool quality. A quality preschool has a few characteristics that set it apart. The first is the education and training of the teachers. You want to have your child participate in a preschool where the instructors are educated individuals, that they are trained and have the education needed in early childhood education so that your child is getting the best instruction they can get. Class size is very important as well. The child to teacher ratio, there is a specific formula that's put out for that. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry, I didn't include that on this. But smaller class sizes are more important to have. You don't want like 20 kids and one teacher in a preschool class. That would be, you wouldn't get any attention there going on. Age appropriate materials. So you want to make sure that the activities and the materials provided for the child in the preschool is appropriate to their developmental level. And the teacher and child interactions, having an enthusiastic teacher that is responding to the children's needs, and that two-way interaction that is healthy is something that's very important to have in preschool quality, to guarantee that your child has a good preschool experience. Focus for high quality is developmentally appropriate educational practice. So basically, the key is to make sure that what they're being taught is developmentally appropriate. All right, here's some cute pictures of some kids in preschool settings. Just wanted to include that in there for our PowerPoint. And preschool as a cognitive intervention. In the United States, there have been different programs, preschool programs put in place in order to help with later school achievement. That was the goal, to give them that head start they need, that jump ahead to be able to do better in school. The focus was especially on at-risk children, and something called Project Head Start was began in 1965. With the Project Head Start, children could receive up to 2 years of preschool at no cost to the parent. Some debate the effectiveness of the program. And basically what we saw was those initially when children came out of these programs, they would have increased performance or, better performance in kindergarten, but those advantages that they start off with quickly fade. What they did see is that something that they did see that was more of a long-term outcome for these programs was that children were less likely to repeat a grade or be placed in special education. There's another one called the High Scope Preschool Project. This was a full day 2-year intervention program. Interestingly, it had similar IQ effects as Head Start. In other words, we had initial boosts in, for example, IQ score achievement in early education, but these were very short-lived. Those boosts in IQ or boosts in academic achievement did not last. What they did find when they did a longitudinal study was they found that children who had gone through this program were less likely to become pregnant, to get arrested, and that they had increased income and family stability, and actually, what's not on here, higher levels of home ownership than children who did not attend the preschool programs. There's just kind of interesting correlational data that they found on these programs. This graph is actually from your book. It is major findings of the High Scope Preschool Study Program. IQ at the age of 5, we can see that there was the in-program group had a higher IQ score at that time compared to the non-program group. Basic achievement at 14 was higher. Homework at age 15 was higher. Graduated regular high school rate was higher. Earned 20,000 or more at the age of 40. And then less arrests by the age of 40. So those were some interesting long-term effects that we saw from this study. We are now going to briefly wrap it up with language development. In early childhood is kind of a sensitive period for language development. There are things that occur called fast mapping, where children are learning new words. They're able to take the context that the word was spoken in and extrapolate from that what the meaning of the word is. They are able to take their language, link it to other things that they have learned. There are cultural variations in fast mapping. In Eastern language, children have a tendency to learn verbs first. In Western languages, children in Western languages tend to learn nouns first. It just has the difference, has to do with the difference in the way the languages are structured. Grammar continues to develop. By age 4, about 90% of children use correct grammar. And that's kind of interesting. Just from being exposed to the language and hearing the language, they have a tendency to be able to use correct grammar by the age of 4. An example of this is demonstrated in a study by Burko, 1958, and there's some other studies that have followed up on this as well. And they would use an illustration like this, or they would say to the child, they would say, "This is a fup." Now there is another one. There are 2 blank. And then they'd ask the child to answer that question. And the child will say, "Fups." There are 2 fups. Even though they have never heard the word fup before or seen a fup before in their life, they were able to understand and properly use the correct grammar for the plural form of fup, which would be fups. So that was just kind of an interesting demonstration of how well children, even at the age of 4, are able to understand and utilize the grammar of their own language. Pragmatics refer to the social rules of language, you know, what you say, what you don't say, when to say something, when not to say something. These are all pragmatics. And this all starts kind of early through gestures and learning that occurs even before they even start to speak. They kind of start developing an understanding of pragmatics. By the age of 2, some kids understand the basic, they have some understanding of basic conversation. By age 4, children are already kind of understanding what to say, what not to say, and how to be more sensitive in conversation. In other words, being able to listen to what somebody says and then have that exchange back and forth. They're developing pragmatics. Okay, that's it for this one. It was kind of short, but at least we got through it. All righty, I hope you guys utilize this. I hope this is somewhat helpful for your studying. Please remember to email me, ask your questions. I really wish we were having live lecture. I'm still not comfortable with this format, but I'm going to just keep plugging away and do the best I can. You guys have a lovely day, and I'll be seeing you soon.